Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SafeYields podcast, where your 15-minute check-in on the smartest ways to earn, build, and explore in DeFi. I'm Mark, CMO of SafeYields, joined by Filipe, the co-founder, and today I'm also joined by Richard from Tusky Tools. Tusky Tools, which gives users control of their data using decentralized technologies. So, Richard, awesome to have you here. Where are you calling in from, and what's your journey into DeFi been like so far?
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks guys for having me on the call. I'm calling in from a little town north of Lisbon in Portugal called Ediceda. Nice day today after a bit of a storm. Yeah, so my short story about DeFi was basically starting off with Bitcoin early in its history, and then kind of around the I think it was 2020, right before COVID, is right when I jumped into DeFi and saw the all the interesting things come out of that. And then since then, just been really focused on more of the data side, data ownership, privacy, things like that on chain.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in. Before we get into the headlines news of last week, I just want to give a quick nod to Emma AI, which is our autonomous DeFi agent here at SafeYields. She's currently been running a delta neutral arbitrage strategy, and even during last week's and the week before's volatility, she managed to stay green. We think it's a perfect example of how automation is reshaping DeFi. So tools like Emma do help users with less guesswork. So just heading on to the first headline. Eric Trump to speak at the Dubai Token 2049. Um, so Token 2049 is one of the biggest crypto conferences in the world currently. It's kind of symbolic his participation, but also significant in our opinion. So the crypto narrative is no longer just about finance; it's also entering politics and policy. So, Richard, any opinions on what political involvement might mean for credibility, regulation, user trust? And in the same vein, how do platforms like Tusky help users with institutional credibility, data protection, and global compliance? A lot of questions, I know, but yeah,
Right.
We we
Well, it's
have
quite a
we have 15 minutes, so go ahead.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting story, right? To go from the previous administration's anti-crypto army to this pro-crypto administration, who are also bag holders and involved with it and doing, their own projects and such. Definitely a bullish sign for crypto, right? We've been looking for this. It's what's quite interesting is crypto did start as kind of a rebellion towards the system. And now we're starting to see an integration between the two come together. And yeah, having that support in the White House, I think is a major tailwind for us. It's really going to help drive things forward. I think there's still a lot of questions and areas to be explored. Like when thinking about policy, I think about like individual rights and making sure that those are upheld. And so things like the right to privacy, I think is really important. We're going to need to develop policy around that to ensure user rights around what they can hold private to themselves, the ability to transact. In a digital economy, this is like absolutely crucial to be able to have some protections around that. The ability to hold crypto, and in terms of like saying, who controls your keys, making sure that being able to hold user wallets and things like that will be important. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how policy will shape around that, given the pro crypto stance that the administration has. It's also kind of a double-edged sword, right? So you also are seeing some kind of interesting projects like, Trump coin and stuff like that. I'm pretty libertarian on a lot of subjects and happy to see a lot of people experimenting with things, but also, there are some maybe certain limits to how far you'd want to take things just to kind of like, keep the scenario kind of clean, So I don't know, it could go both ways, but overall, very bullish.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. You got any opinions on that, Philippe?
Yeah, then again, I think I share, the majority of Richard's opinions. I think we were having this same chat with our last guest in another episode. Is that so? My opinion is, although it's debatable on how things are being done at the moment, regardless, I think it's a bullish sentiment. To be honest, it's just they're bringing, they're bringing it mainstream is quite. It's what we're looking for, right? I was also giving the example of Europe, which is I feel we're getting a little bit behind on the wave, and I think we should some real regulation should come along just to just make it easier for people to get into the space. As an institution, for instance, here in Europe, is pretty much impossible for you to have a crypto asset management company. There's a lot of stuff you have to go through the central bank. Just show that you have the means and the knowledge for it. Professional people working behind. The problem is there's no crypto specialists. There's no no university courses. There's nothing that exists. So it's kind of like a limbo right there. But yeah, I just agree with Richard. It's good to see. Although I'm not the biggest fan of the Trump family, I do understand the value that they're bringing, and seeing one of the heads coming into a token like this, I think it just makes total sense. It's inevitable. These things needs to happen for us to grow as well as a whole.
For sure. So on one end, on one end we have like the U.S. recognizing crypto, as Richard calls it, a double-edged sword. Yeah, we're a lot more attention, but the free aspect of it might become, I mean, maybe too much. And then we also have the EU also recognizing, acknowledging crypto, where they're like tightening the grasp. I think that's actually a pretty funny contrast in some way. Like both super economic powers are really starting to acknowledge it, but the other side of the acknowledgement are almost total opposites. You know what I mean? Like one might just be a little much too free, if that is even possible. I'm not sure it is. The other one might be too tight. So interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess.
I think it comes down to like trying. I think like the best that our governments can do for its citizens is to help promote economic freedom, like really help, like, yeah, we want to protect people. Of course, we want to create some, some guardrails and things like that. So, bad actors can be identified and weeded out of the system and such. But ultimately, not at the expense of individuals having economic freedom, meaning that, again, privacy, ability to transact, ability to hold coins, to be able to be a productive person in society and building on top of these new technologies, especially crypto. Like, I think that's really the important part of the policy planning and makings.
Okay, great. Moving on, let's talk Convergence. Kraken just added commission-free trading over 11,000 US stocks and ETFs. That's one of the most ambitious bridges between TradeFi and crypto we've seen so far. So, Richard, does this, in your opinion, change user expectations for crypto apps? Like, is DeFi moving towards full spectrum wealth tools? And could you share, like, what does Tusky think about hybrid data integrations across these financial verticals?
Well, I think there's a lot of areas to explore and a lot of aspects to consider, but mainly, this idea of tokenizing stocks is, basically it's the end game, right? It's tokenization of all assets is what we're, all looking for in some sense. I think that it's interesting that Kraken's taking the lead on this and doing some great things. I mean, they have a really great user experience, which I think will be kind of like, the entry point for a lot of new users. I always think back, like, I don't know, back in the day, there was like America Online, so you had the internet, this kind of like network of computers and stuff. And then you had this like American Online experience. I mean, without a doubt, like American Online brought a lot of people online by just kind of like curating this kind of experience.
Yeah, you got
And
a CD with your
got a
subscription.
CD.
Yeah.
Or a free floppy disk or
Something
something
like
if you
that,
know
yeah.
to use that, yeah. So I think,
Floppy
Kraken
disk,
is
yeah.
taking the lead on that. They've got great user experience. I think they can open that space up to a lot more users. And I think it's like another way of breaking down silos. So you're getting, like capital markets can be quite siloed and kind of like compartmentalized, and like accessibility to it may be very difficult. So having it tokenized creates more opportunity for more people to jump in. Makes it more global. And while we do have, like, I think, the new administration is very supportive of crypto, but there's also going to be this transition between, the existing regulations around capital markets and the tokenization of capital markets. Those two areas will need to integrate or converge at some point. So does that mean we are just creating like synthetics and, analogs on top of the stock market while still relying on its infrastructure and existing regulations? Or are we going to like codify those regulations and those, rule sets from those assets? Are we going to like codify those into smart contracts and into tokenization? So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. There's probably a lot of work to be done there. But all in all, I think it's like this path going from, if I say it this way, going from banks to chains, to like blockchains.
Yeah.
That's an interesting and very, very profound kind of change. Exciting to see in our lifetime.
For sure, man.
Yeah, true. That's true.
Like just the summing up these last two topics, we're starting to see more complexity, which also means more opportunities, but also more confusion. So from your personal view standpoint, maybe Tusky's as well, what are DeFi users really missing out on right now? Like what's the next big thing, do you think? Is it transparency? Is it strategy intelligence or simplicity? And how does Tusky and your upcoming tools aim to bridge these potential gaps?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's some general things that could always be better, could always be improved upon. Simplicity is, like you mentioned, simplicity, of course, like that's kind of one of the key areas. Yeah, user experience and giving users the American online experience to get on board with DeFi is kind of what it's missing, I think, right now. But as we just talked about, like projects like Kraken and Coinbase, I think they're doing a really excellent job on making that easier and more accessible. I think there's also maybe like something to be said around kind of like the intelligence around the whole DeFi. I mean, I think, trading is a very specialized kind of work, not really something that everyone should be doing or is good at. And I think like projects like Emma and other kinds of like agents and things like that, I think will ultimately help people engage with DeFi and maybe there's this conversion between like existing fund managers to like AI fund managers, and maybe giving different portfolios and giving different kind of risk scenarios. Users can simply just choose like, oh, I'm willing to take risk on this. I want to be more conservative with that. Making things a little bit easier to do with, so you don't really have to be constantly looking at charts and trying to follow trends and technical
Yeah.
analysis and things like that. And so I would be very bullish on the whole AI/agent/bot, maybe curated vaults, things like that. I think would make a lot of sense, make it more friendly for people.
So
But I think we're on the verge of seeing that being developed and rolled out.
so Tusky will be shipping what, a CD with every new user, or where are we now?
Yeah, well,
Floppy
we
disk.
thought about starting with floppy disks. We don't
Oh
want to
yeah,
like marginalize anybody in the
of course.
space.
I
We want to
mean,
yeah.
can you
Well,
have your
I
whole
actually
protocol on
I bet like
3.14
80%
megabytes?
of the space doesn't know what a floppy disk is already. Thanks for giving us a pitch on what we're doing, because that's basically what you've done here. I appreciate it. I feel I have the same sentiment. That's why we're building what we're doing. I also wanted to add that a major problem here that we have, and that's why first we invited you because you're a dear friend, but also things like Tusky, they're solving something that, and we've talked about this, right? So they're solving something that institutions like us, small startups need, which is, so we do have a proprietary technology, we have an IP, and although we do believe in the decentralized nature, there are some, sensitive parts of the code and the algorithm that it's hard to share around, just because, it it's a proprietary technology, and although we do want to make it available to the public, it's still a business. I see something like a platform like Tusky just evolving into something like, and just correct me if I'm just saying something very wild here, but or far-fetched, but something like a decentralized GitHub that you can have, your data just set and just make it public or private in a set of parts on the code and stuff, and that could just bring a little bit more, transparency, and make the users that are using our technology knowing, okay, so these guys they have the data on chain, so they're not centralizing stuff. Although, it makes sense why they're not sharing this side of the code or not, because, competition just come along and use it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because maybe you can top in a little bit on that thought as well. But I see a lot of value in stuff like this. So we want decentralization, of course, but as a business and as an institution, sometimes you need to have a little bit of privacy as well from either other institutions or even your users, but you still want to make them feel comfortable knowing that, okay, so code is there, it's public in some sense, but it's being used from this source, and we know that it's decentralized,
Yeah, well, I think one of the overhanging kind of like ominous kind of like threats that we have with Web2 SaaS platforms and such is the big question is, when will the cloud burst? When will all of the data be leaked or released? And it's an issue of security. It's an issue of privacy. but it's also like the threats are also on the horizon, which is quantum computers, breaking algorithms, things like that. And I think one of looking at the situation through some kind of analysis, you can see that, with data, you're really dealing with three different aspects with data. So data that's being transmitted, you want it to be encrypted. So we basically have that between computers. And second is data at rest. So where's the data stored? Is it encrypted? And the third one is, the computation of data. So if you're, computing analysis of data, doing inference, things like that, is the data while it's being computed protected as well? So data that's in transit, data that's at rest, and data that's being processed should all be within some kind of zero knowledge encryption, right? Meaning that there are no backdoors, that the user controls the keys, that through all of those different phases of the lifecycle of data, that it's protected at that level. That's what Tusky's high, aim is towards, is this level of security and privacy. It's not very easy. It's very, there's been a lot of advances made in encryption in recent times, but there are still areas that need to be exploited and explored. But yeah, I think data ownership is our theme, I guess you can say, with Tusky, and I think it encompasses all those areas. Um, there's also this kind of regulatory issue, like in the European Union, there's regulations around where the data is stored, like physically stored. And that's a challenge for decentralization because you don't know where the data is stored, and there are certain kinds of user rights that the state is trying to protect, which is great, but it's also, having to be reconciled between the two. And I think that, like, coming back to the analysis of what's wrong with the data today, it's, the internet I would say the internet, when it was designed, it lacked this security layer built into it. Like it was all about open information exchange. So piece by piece, we kind of added on layer and layer and layer of encryption, but none of it is like wholly or, bulletproof in some sense. It's piece by piece. So I think that's going to be like a big change. And and the regulations will have to follow and update towards that. So I think we're going the right direction, but there is still a lot of work to be done and a lot of change to maneuver through. I think also another aspect is like pedagogy and just like teaching people about privacy and what does it mean to control your own data, being able to access your data, making sure you can process it without leaking data and things like that. And it's kind of a bit abstract. Like people don't really connect all these issues in a way that makes sense. But I think one easy way of one easy analogy to think about is just your physical privacy. I'm here in my house, right? Like I don't think there are any cameras in here, but I tell you one thing, if there was a camera here that the government could turn on when they want or turn off when they want, I would not be okay with that. And I don't think a single person in the world would be okay with that. That would essentially make you a prisoner to some other entity within your own home. Nobody feels good about that. And we all have a physical home and we have a digital home. And that digital home, we still need to protect those same rights and convey the idea that your digital privacy is just as important as your private physical privacy. So yeah, I think just promoting these ideas and helping to educate people, I think that's a really maybe one of the more softer skills around the technology, but it's just as equally important.
Amazing
Yeah,
insight.
and I can feel the importance of it on your speech. It was a great speech, actually. That example, that analogy, just makes you feel like, oh crap, maybe I should be paying attention to this. I mean, we all know, you go to the supermarket, you buy a chocolate, and then on Instagram Reels, there's a Kinder announcement showing up. All of a sudden, your bank is sharing your information with all of other entities. You feel creeped out, but you don't really feel it that much because it's momentaneous. But when you put it like that, it does, pinch a nerve there, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example of, privacy applied to data being processed. Showing me what's for sale when I go to the supermarket is probably a good service for me. Like if I want to go buy this product and then somehow the system knows, oh, here's another product that's just as good or even better, but maybe less expensive, like that could be a very good service. But how that service is rendered to me is what's important. If that data can be computed in privacy where no one else has access to that data, only myself, I could see that as being actually a positive thing. But if that data means like someone else is profiting from my data, then it means I'm a product. I'm just being sold to somebody else. My data is being sold. And it's not only an ethical issue, but I think it's also, in any kind of transaction, I think when you have this asymmetric balance where one side has more information over the other side, you're creating a situation where someone is exploitable. And so I think privacy is one of the tools that we have to combat this exploitation, to kind of keep the fairness, to reduce the asymmetric information in a transaction. I think these are all very important aspects. And again, it's really hard to like flesh it out in 15 minutes, but it could be a very good, discussion down the road if you guys want.
For
Write a
sure,
book
man.
about it.
We definitely need to expound on this topic down the line. For sure. So just wrapping up, what's one thing you're personally excited about from the Tusky Tools roadmap, if you can share anything that is?
Yeah, well, we've got some things in the works that I think we intend to keep quiet for the short term. But one of the things that I find very exciting, so we've been doing data ownership and privacy for for some time now, and we've recently, as of last year, migrated the system over to the Walrus network, which is a decentralized storage network built with SWE as a coordination layer. And I find this very exciting because, kind of looking at it, being able to coordinate policies around data based on user needs on chain, and then having another network focus on the most efficient replication and protection of that data creates a very, very solid platform for Tusky to build upon. And while, launching Tusky today is sort of a decentralized Dropbox, if I may say, you know, this is just kind of like the beginning layer of things to come. And we can imagine other things that might integrate AI chatbots on your private data, or might integrate things like gaming and ownership of assets and games, and being able to trade those, and being able to like get off of like cloud storage. I mean, there's all these different things that Tusky can deliver. But I think really the focus right now is, trying to get sort of developer experience out there so that other teams could build upon the Tusky and build upon all of these feature sets that we're offering. So yeah, there's a lot of different avenues to explore here.
Awesome.
So where can people dive in and learn more about the Tusky?
So you can go online on X, look for Tusky Tools or Tusky.io website, sign up. The user experience is great on Tusky. You don't need to have a wallet set up. You just can log in with your Google account. You can pay in SWE. You can do the whole experience without having to bring out your credit card or anything like that. So yeah, there's a few places to pick up on. So, and we'll also be in Dubai, I believe, next week. I'm not sure when this will air, but we'll be there for the Token 2049 event, and we'll be at the Sweet Base Camp event. So come see us.
Well, that's a wrap for now. I definitely think we should have another talk about privacy. You obviously have some very very exciting and interesting insights on that one.
Yeah, with
But for now,
pleasure. We can definitely deep dive into it.
definitely cool.
Then again, thanks for your time, Richard. It was
Yeah,
really
thank you so
a
much.
pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That was Richard from Tusky Tools. So if you want to explore smarter ways to manage your on-chain portfolio, check out, as you mentioned, Tusky.io. For AI-driven strategies, curated vaults, and real signals, visit SafeYields.io. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe. Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys. Thanks.